In the 1920s, 100 years ago, this would have been golfing attire. The clubs, these were the clubs. And as far as the playing conditions, as far as I can ascertain, they would have been something like this. I'm Michael Woods, Chief Scientist at the Asian Turfgrass Center. Over the past century, there have been developments in technology, knowledge, tools, and techniques that allow turfgrass managers today to create any type of playing surface. In this video, I'm going to explain a simple process that can be used to achieve the desired type of playing conditions at every facility. When we're trying to have great conditions, if we already have them, we want to repeat them, to have them for as many days in the year as possible. If, unfortunately, we don't have those conditions, we'd like to know what to adjust in order to achieve them. So that's what this is all about. We need to know what to measure, and we need to know how to adjust it in order to create the desired conditions. Our objective is to have the type of conditions that are appropriate for our facility for a certain time of year. In order to achieve that objective, we need to have grass that is resilient enough to the maintenance that's required, the type of mowing and rolling and restriction of growth perhaps that is necessary in order to produce the desired condition. And we also need to have soil properties that allow the grass and the surface to perform. So that's a top-down approach saying that in order to achieve those conditions, we need to have a certain type of grass condition and we need to have a certain type of soil condition. I'm going to go into a few details about this. But there's another way that we can look at this, and the other way to look at it is saying if we have soil properties that allow the grass and the surface to perform, we're going to have grass that grows in that soil, and that grass is going to be resilient to the necessary maintenance when it's growing in that soil. And if we have those two things, the result, I would say the inevitable result, is going to be the desired playing conditions. So when we frame it that way, it's quite simple. Now, I asked a master greenkeeper if he could give some comments about this and give another perspective on playing conditions. So we went from where I am now in Trong in southern Thailand and went all the way to France to Le Bord Golf Club to talk to Lee Strutt.
Hi, my name is Lee Strutt and I'm the course superintendent, estate manager for Le Bord Golf Club based here in France. For me, the importance of playing surfaces is crucial to the business. From the top down, we have to provide a facility for people to come and enjoy and play golf on, whether that's in the summer or whether that's in the heart of the winter time. To underpin that has to be a turf management regime that complements and supports the first need, which is the playing surface. But we can't have playing surfaces that can't be maintained because this then doesn't make it very sustainable. Key element to any good, successful plan is a balance between the two. Managing and understanding the first part, the playing surface for the business. The second part is understanding the management to sustain and support the first element. Get those two correct and you have a successful business.
Lee says if you get those two correct, you'll have a successful business. And I completely agree with him. Now, to have that successful business, we're going to need to measure some things. We're going to need to keep track of some things in order to adjust them to get the playing surfaces that we want. To start with surface performance, I want to use the stimp meter to measure how far the ball rolls. Almost everybody has a stimp meter, but not everybody records the data, and few people keep the data so that they can look at it over time. Here's a year of stimp meter measurements from Keia Golf Club in Fukuoka, Japan, and this is 207 measurements taken over the course of the last year from December of 2019 up until the end of November of 2020. What you can see is in the wintertime, in January, February, the green speeds were at a peak of over 11 feet almost every day. During that time of year, the grass is dormant, and so the ball rolls farther because there is no growth. And then during the summertime on those warm season grass greens, what you can see here is the green speed varies through the year. It also varies on a day-to-day basis, and it's useful to measure that. This tells you if you're already at the type of green speed that you want, you don't need to do rolling, you don't need to do mowing, you don't need to do a double cut. You're able to calibrate the amount of work that you're doing based on the surface conditions. Also, if the stimpmeter measurement is not what you want, you can increase the mowing, you could increase the rolling, you could increase the dose of a plant growth regulator to further restrict the growth, you could cut the nitrogen fertilizer to restrict the growth. All of those things are going to lead to a lower effective mowing height and a faster stimpmeter measurement. I don't think it's absolutely essential to measure the firmness of the green, but that's something that can be measured. You can also measure how smooth the greens are using fancy tools or with a simple bobble test, just looking at how the ball bounces and chatters as it goes across a putting surface. All of these things can be used to evaluate the surface. I think the stimpmeter measurement usually gives a good indication, and that's probably enough for most facilities. Let's move on to the grass measurements or measuring something about the plant. Everybody should know the nitrogen application rate. How much nitrogen has been applied. Here's a year of nitrogen applications. Also, in fact, this is all the fertilizer applications to the greens at this golf course. There was 12 grams of nitrogen per square meter applied, no phosphorus, 3.9 grams of potassium per square meter. So if you just write down the amount of fertilizer applied at every application, you will have this. Because nitrogen is the element that really controls how fast the grass will grow, you need to know how much has been applied year to date. Everybody should know that. Another thing to know is the plant growth regulator application rate, timing, and effect. Now, most golf courses are using plant growth regulators, at least on putting greens. If you're not using them, then you can disregard this. But if you are using them, keep track of when they're applied, what the application rate is, and what the effect is, because there's been lots of research by Bill Kreuzer. These models, based on temperature, based on growing degree days, predict how much of an effect the growth regulator application is having on your turf based on what the temperatures have been at your site, based on what rate of product you applied and when you applied it. I recommend using the Greenkeeper app for that, and that is free to use, or you can use a premium version, but this is something that's going to be really useful in helping you to achieve consistent growth regulation. Additionally, I think you can measure the results of that with clipping volume. I think it's really useful to measure how much the grass is growing, measure the growth rate, and you can do that by looking at the volume of clippings mowed off. This is really useful. These data are tremendously useful over the course of a year. You can see when you have the best conditions, when you have the best playability, and what the clipping volume is, how much the grass is growing at those times of year. You can then try to achieve that and adjust it if you're not achieving the results that you want. It's easy to do this. People think it would be daunting to get a bucket and dump the clippings, but the clippings have to be emptied out of the basket anyway. Why not measure how many clippings you've gotten? It turns out to be tremendously useful. I asked my friend from Australia, Brad Revill, who's now up in Bangkok, Thailand, I asked him if he could comment about the utility of some of these measurements, because I know he's been taking a lot of these measurements, doing a modern approach to turfgrass management, and I've seen that he's been getting some great results. Here's Brad.
Hi, I'm Brad from BRT Agronomy. So, Data collection, why do it? I personally find the collection of key turf health and performance related data essential, not only to the success of our agronomy programs, but the success of the golf course from a business standpoint. With this data, you can determine your ideal performance targets, as well as identify target ranges for both turf health and other growth-related parameters that allow you to achieve your performance goals consistently. By tracking this data, you can easily see when adjustments need to be made to stay on track and achieve your goals. For example, I know at this particular golf course that if they can keep the daily greens growth rate between 0.2 and 0.5 litres per 100 square metres, they can achieve the desired green speed consistently, not lose too much speed throughout the day, and therefore keep their paying guests happy.
Brad says to keep the playing guests happy, and I completely agree. That's about right. As you'll be aware, one has to do some work to keep surfaces performing, but some of that work is disruptive. Things like verticutting, punching holes in surfaces, core aerification, sand top dressing. Those are things that are all disruptive to the surface. You don't see that kind of work being done right in the middle of a golf tournament. So clearly minimizing this disruptive work should be a goal. And one way we do that is with the growth rate. We try to minimize the growth rate, so we have to do less and less of this disruptive work. Let's move on to the soil measurements, and we can see that one of the first things I'm recommending is to know the soil water content. Now you can do that with soil moisture meters, or you can also try to model it. You can model or predict the soil moisture content based on a knowledge of your approximate field capacity and based on a look at the evapotranspiration or the estimated plant water use at your site. So either way, whether you measure it or whether you're guessing at it, you should have some idea of how much water is in the soil, and that's going to be related to how much the grass can grow. It's also going to be related to the surface performance. So you should have some idea about that. Additionally, I recommend testing the soils annually for soil nutrient content, and you can interpret those. You can take these soil samples, have them tested at the lab, and then interpret them using MLSN, the MLSN guidelines. And this is a way that you practically guarantee that you won't have any nutrient deficiencies. You won't have any nutrient deficiencies, and it minimizes the over application of fertilizer. So you can keep things simple, have all the nutrients the grass can use, and not worry about that at all. I do recommend doing soil testing though, because we can't always tell if the grass has enough nutrients or if it's deficient just by looking at it. This grass looks pretty healthy, doesn't it? It looks good, but it turns out it's got a massive phosphorus deficiency. This grass right here, this is the same species, the same day, it was planted on the same date, it's growing in the same soil. The only difference, this one was supplied with phosphorus. Look how much more it grew. So it's really useful to do soil testing to find out if a certain element needs to be added as fertilizer or not. If you do that, I think you'll find it really useful. Additionally, I want to know the quantity of sand applied to the soil. This is something that is disruptive, it's costly, and if you can minimize it and get it just right, you're able to optimize the playing conditions just the way that you want them to be. When we do top dressing sand applications, I would like to know how much sand has been applied as a volume per area of the turf surface. If you do volume divided by area, it's a depth. I think a depth is a really simple way to standardize this, because now it's volume per area, depth, that's transferable from any location to any other location. Know this number so you can adjust it. Don't just put sand and not keep track of how much you applied. Additionally, you can measure the organic matter accumulation. I call this the OM246, measuring the total organic matter right at the surface of a green. This tells you if the disruptive work that's been done is enough, or if there needs to be even more of this disruptive work done. This OM246 test is something that I've been doing over the past 4 years or so, and I find it really useful. You take samples, cut them to depth, then test them at the lab for total organic matter. Then you can see over time, is the sand top dressing that you're putting down, is it enough to keep the organic matter constant, or is the organic matter going up? Or is the disruptive work you're doing, the core aerification, the verticutting, the sand top dressing, causing the organic matter to go down? By evaluating this, you can fine-tune the work and adjust the work just right to have it just at the level where you will achieve the desired playing conditions. So the result is like this. If you measure those specific things that I've just mentioned, I think there's 8 of them. You measure the stimpmeter, and then you measure things about the grass so that it will be resilient to the necessary maintenance. You measure a few soil properties. If you keep track of all of those things, you can adjust them just the way they need to be. And the result, the inevitable result, is the desired playing conditions. I've seen this work really well at PGA Catalunya, where David Bataller has the turf and the course in tournament condition every time that I've visited, at every time of year that I've visited. I've been there in winter, in summer, in spring, and it's always excellent. It gets better every time I visit. David has been very kind to prepare his own movie for inclusion in this film, and let's see what he has to say.
Hi Micah, welcome to PGA Catalunya. Let me show you our progress over the last 8 years I met you and started following your MLSN. I believe that MLSN is just the starting point of my thinking about the greenkeeping practices. We need to get rid of all those snake oils that are used in our industry. We are a famous resort, hosting visitors year-round, so expectations are very high every day. We maintain the green surfaces with minimum disruption techniques in order to get nice ball roll at no less than 10 feet year-round. The key to minimize the organic fetch production starts with having no mowing stripes on the greens. Actually, I don't remember last time I've seen any. This 2020 has been a very hard year, and we learn even more where to put our resources to be more efficient and sustainable, confirming that many times less is more. Thank you, Micah.
If you have control of the growth rate, it's like everything falls into place. And David is able to have control of the growth rate by noticing that when there's no lines on the greens, when the growth of the grass is so slow that he mows the greens and doesn't see mowing stripes, then he's getting a level of growth, a level of clippings that allows him to use that as an indicator that the growth rate is just right. When they do that, they have the desired stimpmeter in the morning, they have the desired stimpmeter in the afternoon, and the grass is growing at a rate that they're able to do a minimal amount of disruption. They don't need to verticut, they don't need to top dress much, they don't need to disturb the surfaces. It's just a great surface today, a great surface tomorrow, and just repeat and repeat and repeat. These are the things you should know. These are the things you should keep track of. These are the things that you should measure. This is important, it's easy, and it's effective. And I can't really recommend this highly enough. It works. It works really well. It works to achieve any kind of conditions that you want and to do it as efficiently as possible. The problem is, if you don't know all of these things, if you don't know what the stimpmeter measurement is, if you don't know how much nitrogen's been applied, if you don't know how many nutrients are in the soil, and if you don't know how much sand's been applied, in a sense, you're flying blind. You wouldn't know how to adjust things. Which direction should you adjust them? To make the turf better, to make the playing conditions better, should you add more nitrogen or less? More sand or less? You don't want to be flying blind. You want to know what has been done so that you can adjust things in the proper direction and get just the right results. If you do that, if you have the turf in control like that, if you have the management of the turf in control like that, the result is almost inevitable.